Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by Ruth Poniarski. We're going to be discussing healing from mental illness. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Ruth, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, and I just want to make it clear to our viewers that you are not a qualified mental health professional, and that what you're going to tell us about is based on your personal experiences, and anyone suffering from a mental health illness, condition, disorder, what have you, should always consult with a qualified professional. So with that said, would you take a minute or two, please, and introduce yourself to our viewers?
Hi, I'm Ruth Poniarski. I'm currently an author and an artist, and I'm here to tell you my story.
Okay, simple as that. I assume the first question I have to ask you is, what's your story?
It's a long story.
You can have a few minutes.
Yeah, I've written a memoir, Journey of the Self, Memoir of an Artist, and it encapsulates the years 1977 to 1987. In 1977, that was my fourth year in college, and I had gone to a small college party, and I innocently ingested angel dust baked in a brownie cake, which was given to me by a male scheming friend. And after that, my life turned for the worse. I had a nervous breakdown following ingesting the angel dust, a death-defying breakdown. I went to college in the north, and what had happened was I had rested for an hour after ingesting it. Then I went to my car. I drove aimlessly in northern New York, reaching the New York State Thruway. My mind was paranoid. I was imagining that there was a war between the capitalists and socialists, and that my people were abandoning me, and I was left to an apocalyptic world. Well, I abandoned my car on the shoulder of the New York State Thruway. I walked 12 miles from midnight till dawn, and when the sun rose, reality struck me for a minute. I hitched a ride back to the college town where my apartment was. My frazzled father was waiting for me because the state police had contacted him.
They found the car.
They found the car on the shoulder of the highway. They looked up the registration, and it went to my father. And he was like frazzled. No one knew that I was going to come back. They didn't. I was missing. After that, I had my first, he took me home. I had to abort my studies. My studies were in architecture, a 5-year program, very, very difficult program. Anyway, I had to abort that for the moment. He took me to a psychiatrist, my first session with a psychiatrist. Now, keep in mind, back in 1977, mental illness was not that open. It was a stigma. Therapy wasn't really generalized. No one talked about it. Not even in the families. It just wasn't out there. It wasn't open. And the medications at that time were very limited also. Thorazine and I think Haldol, those were the two medications that were available. Quite different from the 2000s and the 1990s and 2000s, where an assortment of medicines were discovered that could relate to many different conditions in mental illness. Anyway, so henceforth, every 6 months to a year, I would break down. My symptoms were severe insomnia, irrational thinking, anxiety, erosion of hope, which is actually the most important of this whole story. I said anxiety.
Mhm.
And the doctor that I had at the time these symptoms went unchecked. So I kept having a cyclic malady every 6 months to a year. I would have a breakdown, which was caused by the social stimulus in my life. And I had a severe conscience. So I would ruminate about things and I couldn't sleep. That's when my insomnia came in. Couldn't sleep. That's the most important factor is you don't sleep. Okay, so in between those episodes, I was trying to lead and attempting to lead a normal life. I finished my architecture program. It took me 7 years, never gave up. I traveled alone to Europe, which I should not have done. I had many acquaintance friends, too many, and I was always looking for Mr. Right. Always on. It took me 13 years of dating to find Mr. Right, but that's another story.
Okay. That's something what you just said. You also wrote it, and that's what got me curious. You wrote that you had too many friends. What does that mean?
Too much stimulus. Just too much stimulus.
Okay.
That's what okay, so anyway, so for 7 years, I was under the care of my first psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And my symptoms went unchecked. And I had death-defying breakdowns, but the 7 years, it culminated into a horrific accident. I had not slept for 7 days. I participated in a psychological workshop, which was confrontational, which made me very stressed out that I couldn't continue it. So I did not continue. It was happening in New York City, and I was in an apartment in the suburbs. I was in my apartment, a 3rd-story apartment. I was imagining that my neighbors were going to persecute me. I went 7 days without sleep. The doctor didn't recognize it. I tried to communicate with him, but he couldn't recognize it. He told me he had other crisis patients, and he said, come to your normal appointment time, which is like around 4 days later, hence of this. Anyway, so it culminated and 7 days without sleep. So anyway, I decided to rappel down the wall of my apartment building. I tied my flannel bed sheets together to form a rope. Mm-hmm. And then I anchored it on my kitchen steel post of the table, the steel post. I went about 5 feet with this made up rope, climbed out the window, holding the rope. Well, the force of gravity was unlike anything you would feel. It was iron chains pulling me down. I couldn't get the rope to rappel down the wall. I planned my fall in 3 seconds. Feet first, roll to my side as not to hit my head. Right. I don't remember my fall. I blacked out. I woke up in the emergency room at the local hospital. From then on, my life really changed. 12 hours of surgery, 2 months in the hospital, 1 month in the hospital and 1 month in rehab in New York City, 6 months in a wheelchair. And then I got up and walked. Then I found my next psychiatrist, who was the right psychiatrist for my high risk condition. His name was George. He always went by George. He was a Quaker and a World War II veteran. And
I've made that mistake myself.
Yeah. He had
once I interviewed a veterinarian who was a veteran, and by the time the interview was over, I didn't know what I was saying. We were both laughing so hard. So don't feel bad about it. No need to be embarrassed.
Okay, so he had a lot of common sense. He wrote essays on how to achieve good sleep, how to invest your money well, how to have a proper diet, proper vitamins, etc. He wrote all kinds of common sense essays, and he gave them to me one at a time. He also said to not have that much stimulus in my life, keep it simple. I was able to forge better friendships, more connected with my friendships. My nervous breakdowns became spaced apart much more, like a year, then 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. And then in 1999, I was prescribed the most effective psychotic medicine, antipsychotic medicine. I'll tell you what it is. It's Zyprexa, which is, I think, not Anaprex.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I forgot the generic for it.
Yeah.
Olanzapine, that's what it is. And then a couple of years later, after I had another break, I was prescribed the correct dosage to take. All through all of this, though, I never, ever gave up. That's one of my messages in my book. I never gave up. Even though I had all of these breakdowns going on, I always wanted to have normalize my life. And I did the best I could. And anyway, so I was prescribed, that was 2010. Now, since 2010, I have been break-free.
Now, these breakdowns were far apart. So
they became further apart, yes.
How did you know after a breakdown, there's nothing for a month, 2 months, 6 months? How did you know that you weren't cured?
You know, that's a good question. Each time I went through it, I thought I was cured. I was, in a way, I was in semi-denial, saying that, oh, it's not going to happen again. I'm cured. That's not what happened. But I'll tell you, since I started writing my memoir, this is in 2010. And when I wrote it, I looked at myself at a distance, and I was able to see the patterns that I had of demise, my patterns, my cyclic patterns. And I removed myself from it, and I was able to see that, comprehend that. And taking that medicine, the right effective medicine and combination of that, I was able to break the cycle. But only when I admitted that to myself consciously, I'm like really consciously, that I was subservient to this cyclic malady. But up until that point, up until 2010, I every time I had a break, I thought I was cured. And I didn't pay attention to the cyclic symptoms. And then, but after 2010, this is the thing. If I had something coming on, I recognized it. And with the help of my third doctor, I would increase my medication for that period of time until I until I ran the hurdle, until I overcame the hurdle. But I had to get to that point where I recognized that I had a cyclic malady. It took many years. And I'll tell you one other thing. To viewers, if you're suffering and your psychiatrist is not effective, give it 3 months, look for another psychiatrist or caretaker, psychologist, whatever. If your medication is not working with 3 or 4 or 5 months, try another medication. I think it's all trial and error. It took me a long time to realize it's all trial and error to find the right doctor and to find the right medication. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Well, that's really the same for anybody who's on medication. They know that, the doctor will say, here, try this. I'm going to give you 5 milligrams and come back in a month or 2 months and we'll see. And they'll either say, okay, it's working, or they'll increase it to 10 or 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
I have that, or had that, with high blood pressure. I had that when I had Graves' disease, which is when your thyroid goes kaplowy. It gave me the medication. I'm laughing because it's called methimazole and something
Oh,
like that. And
that's some name.
I told the doctor that I told all my friends that she had prescribed me meth, which
Yeah, I was going to
technically
say.
was, yeah. And
Yeah.
what shocked me was she said, Bruce, I've been doing this for, I don't remember what she said, 15 years, 20 years. Nobody's ever said that before. So, but anyways, it is trial and error. But our topic is healing from mental illness. It's not, you've been talking about how your mental illness was treated by physicians and by yourself. Healing from mental illness means getting over it. So how
That's
do you get over
how do you get,
having
that's what
been
I'm saying. You
mentally?
have to realize that you have something before you can get over it. And that it took me many years to realize that. And I did heal, and my life became much better,
And I,
very productive, very creative. But in that healing from 2010 on, I really experienced a great healing from what I had gone through.
it would appear to me, based on what you've said over the last 15 plus minutes, that you're you healed yourself from mental illness by one recognizing the fact that you had been mentally ill and then writing the book.
Yeah, it was a combination, writing the book and being on the right medication. Even being on the right medication gave me a breather. It gave me that time to reason and to see my pattern. It gave me that time, you know.
How much of a factor were your family and friends in your healing from mental illness?
Okay, I'll tell you one thing. My father was always there for me during this whole escapade of all of these ill. He always picked up the pieces. He always brought me home from the hospital. My mother would take care of me a little bit. She would, structure the environment in her house, in my house. She would structure things. We would do art projects together and everything. So that was kind of healing at the moment. And my friends, well, when I had started therapy with George, um, I didn't have all that many friends. I befriended one person, Marge, and we became very close and kind of connected emotionally, which I didn't have before. I didn't really connect with my friends before I saw George. There were acquaintances, nothing really connecting. I didn't connect with anybody really on a good level. And my parents were there. They didn't abandon me. I mean, a lot of parents would give up. They never gave up. They always were there. There was like a stable um, relationship for me. But I'll tell you, the first psychiatrist that I saw, he wanted me to part from my parents and to be independent and develop a support system independent of my parents, which was really the wrong road, because when I was going through all of these nervous breakdowns, I never really told anybody. I kept it a secret. I led a double life, which also made me very isolated, because I didn't really invest the time with my parents because of what the psychiatrist was trying to accomplish with me, which was the wrong road. So when I had gone and reached George, he included my parents in therapy once a month. He included my brother sometimes when my brother was in the Army. When he was in from the Army, he would come for a session with me. So he included my family. And in that way, I really I was really confident to have deeper relationships with several friends.
The writing of the book.
Yes.
No. That's not what I want to ask. Your art.
Yes.
That interests me because when I lived in Israel, for about 3 years, I was employed by a children's mental health center. It's a small center in Jerusalem that used expressive art therapy. These were children who had undergone a trauma and had, as a result of that trauma, they stopped communicating with usually anybody but the immediate family, maybe a teacher. The example I like to give, because it's the simplest, is a little girl was run over by a truck. The truck did not touch her. She fell. The driver knew where she was. He knew where he was, and he was able to keep on driving until he was clear of her. I assume he saw her in the side view mirrors, and then he got up. She wasn't touched at all. There wasn't a spot of grease on her. Her clothes were clean, but it was the trauma of the event. 3 years later, she drew a picture, a storyboard. Little girl walking, little girl falling, little girl being seeing a truck coming, truck running over the little girl stands up, little girl runs off and plays with her friends. That's the easiest example of a breakthrough using expressive art therapy.
Yes.
Now, you were doing the art yourself. You didn't have an art therapist with you. That wasn't part of your professional treatment.
No.
What impact do you think did the art, what type of art? Painting, sculpting?
Surreal paintings.
Okay.
Poetic surreal paintings.
Okay.
Here, I'll show you.
You have an example?
Can you see that?
No. No. It's not. You gotta. There we go. That looks like part of a body.
Yeah, it's me wringing out my hair onto an abandoned building on the bottom. Anyway.
And not important.
Anyway, what I do, my work is poetic. It's not about me jumping out windows or standing in Jamaica Bay. It's not that, which I've been through. But what it's done for me is I was able to concentrate and focus my very active imagination and come up with surreal stories. And when I paint, I don't start with this complete story in my mind. I start with a figure or part of the painting, and then I compose the painting as I paint, using photographs as my references for each item of the painting, each subject.
So you're not painting the photograph.
I'm not painting the photograph, but I use it as a reference.
Okay.
And it's helped me. It's made my mind focus because I have a very active imagination, and it's not displaced. It's placed into coming up with these poetic paintings. So in that sense, it was very healing for me because I can focus and channel, and also I developed a passion. I think if you have a passion in life, I think that could really subvert the negativity in your life. If you have a passion for doing something, develop a passion, find a passion. I recommend that for anybody, whether it be painting, music, cooking, photography, miniatures. A lot of people work on miniatures all over the world. They have miniature doll houses and miniature little furniture. I mean, if you can get into something creative, I think it's very healing. It's very helpful. And that's what I did. That's what I found through my art.
So basically, there are three components to your healing from mental illness. It's first acknowledging the fact that you have a mental illness, then it's writing about it, and then it's finding something to be passionate about.
Yes. Yes.
Well, since I got it right,
Yes.
what I want to do now is to share your contact information with our viewers, and I will ask my standard final question. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
I think the one thing to take away from this whole process, this whole interlude of mental illness is to never lose hope. That's a very difficult thing, but never lose hope and never give up. Keep going. And the other thing is to finally accept yourself. And if you can accept yourself, you can really lead a very productive life. So to hang on and never give up. That's my message.
Ruth, I want to thank you profusely. Not a lot of people would come on a podcast and open up the way you have. And I appreciate it personally. And on behalf of our viewers, I thank you.
Oh, I thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.